This conference will now be recorded.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us this lunchtime. As I said, hope you guys are enjoying the opportunity to work from home right now. We want this lunchtime to be as productive as possible and hopefully position you to be a little better educated around DR as a service, and also to hear from probably the leading DR as a service provider, iland, today, and how their solution can help you protect your entire operating infrastructure very, very simply and easily. And I'm joined today by Will Urban. Hey, Will. Thanks for working with me today on delivering this.
Thank you, Sam, for inviting me, and thanks everybody for showing up.
So here's today's agenda. We're going to very quickly click through the 3-2-1 rule of data availability. We're going to discuss how data backups are no longer enough in this day and age. We'll then move on to disaster recovery options for IT resilience. We'll quickly touch base on who USA Voice and Data is and what makes us the DRaaS experts. And then we'll obviously be introducing iland, who, as I said, is probably the leading DRaaS solution providers here in the United States, etc. And then Will is basically going to walk us through an introduction to iland, cover the breadth of their offerings real quickly, and then do a deep dive and a demo of their actual disaster recovery as a service solution. We'll be wrapping up, and we'll be taking any questions throughout the presentation. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to chime in. Every question's a good question, and we'll be leaving you with a couple of takeaways and sort of next step if you want to look into these solutions more deeply. So the 3-2-1 rule of data availability is simply this. It's best practices to have 3 copies of data. Those backups should be on 2 different media types, even if those are local backups. And it's absolutely crucial to have one of those copies offsite, etc. And obviously, with the adoption of cloud services, having those offsite copies is becoming easier and easier, and obviously with the explosion of broadband availability and fiber availability and so on and so forth, getting your data offsite is easier now than ever. I don't know if you've got any comments in that regard, Will.
No, it's perfect, and it kind of leads into what we're talking about. I mean, virtualization has sort of really revolutionized everything that we do in IT anyhow, but the ability to transport identical copies of your data and bring them online is kind of the key technology that's really made all of this stuff work. One of the good things about cloud is with backups especially, you now have a hardware agnostic platform, so you don't have to worry about, do I still have that DLT tape drive to recover my tapes in a year and a half? Do I, what happens if I can't get to my tape drive because we're in a quarantine situation? Cloud gives you that hardware agnostic, always available third stage of air-gapped backups for recoverability. That's really, really important in today's age.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head. Hardware is obviously becoming less and less of an issue, and it makes everyone's lives a lot easier having everything just virtualized. So obviously data is your lifeblood, and there we go. I'm sorry, I don't know. Let me just and it obviously needs your protection, etc. So obviously you need service availability and access to the data. Unfortunately, data can be deleted, so there's easily there's a human error that you need to like sort of take care of. Obviously, you have the external threats such as ransomware, etc. Getting access to your data and making it unavailable to you. You've got internal threats. Maybe there's somebody who is no longer happy being there, and they've got plans to move elsewhere, and they might choose to take some action in regards to your data. So so that's obviously a threat. And then obviously any sort of policy gaps that you have in regards to long-term archival policies and so on and so forth. And obviously we're all facing issues around legal compliance with various regulations necessary, etc. And obviously these outages or lack of ability to get to that data or corrupted data and breaches, etc., can happen to any size business. So obviously we all hear about the real big deals like your Facebooks and so on and so forth, right? And Amazons and so on and so forth. But it doesn't really matter how large or small your business is. We've all kind of heard of somebody who, you know, hey, this is alarming to me that, you know, you can have a $52,000 ransomware scare and end up spending 2.6 million to try and recover from it, right? And obviously, the less prepared you are for any of these breaches or upsets to your data, the larger that potential cost might be. And then obviously outside the actual dollar cost, there's the intangible cost of an outage, both the perception of your company as you try and market yourself, what sort of loyalty you can expect from any sort of clients whose data may have got breached, etc. And obviously the overall, your clients' overall confidence with you begins to wane and go off target. So definitely, if data is your lifeblood, then I would say that your operating infrastructure is your business's vital organs and limbs. So when you're talking about true IT resilience, having data backups is just not enough, right? Your true resilience lies with your ability to recover your entire organizational operations. So it's not just about the data, it's about the applications, etc., etc. And obviously, lots of those applications are cloud-based already, but you may have some special applications and so on and so forth, which again can be virtualized and moved offsite, etc. So what do you mean we have backups? I love this. So obviously the problem with backups is, hey, guess what? They might not meet your recovery point objectives. They might have painful RTOs. Those local backups can be targeted by malicious software and hacks, etc. And clearly, it's one thing having the backups, but if you haven't got anything to restore those backups to, you're kind of dead in the water. It doesn't really make any difference, right? So that's really the whole purpose today of bringing this to your attention and the need for real DR as a service versus just backup as a service, BaaS. So 96% of companies that have both backups and a recovery plan were able to survive ransomware attacks. So I think, you know, this kind of like really shows the importance of planning for more than just a loss of data, right? You need a full-blown recovery plan if you're going to be able to survive even a simple ransomware attack. But obviously, traditional DR has been easier said than done. DR for an entire data center can be not only complex, but it can also take an awful lot of time away from an already overburdened IT staff. So, and frankly, some of the IT staff, you know, they aren't necessarily skilled, and it's not really their subject matter expertise handling DR. So all of that with replication duplication can be costly, and testing can be risky, particularly if you haven't got a very robust test plan and you don't exercise that test plan frequently. Fortunately, there are options, however. Obviously, you can do it yourself, but that's a whole lot of infrastructure to manage, that backup infrastructure. And it doesn't matter what data center colo you may be putting all this equipment, etc., and coordinating all this networking and cabling and God knows what. That can be very complex, versus leveraging a trusted DRaaS partner who, this is their core business, who does this day in, day out for thousands of different businesses, who have a concierge to handle onboarding and support, and are really dedicated to making sure that your DR solution is a success. Obviously, your success is their success, and that's why we have folks like iland offering these services. They recognize they have a very specific skill set which is valuable and allows businesses' own internal IT resources, and even IT MSPs who don't necessarily have a strong DR as a service resource set within their employees. This is a great partnering opportunity for them. So who are USA Voice and Data? We're basically a leading technology solution advisor and broker. We focus in all sorts of areas around cloud platform, voice, internet network, etc., data center, and so on and so forth. We kind of position our services via a number of different categories. We obviously do telecom and cloud advisory services. We offer brokering around telco, cloud, energy, the whole 9 yards. And obviously, being a broker, a lot of what we do is deliver expense management for our clients and help them reduce their costs. Obviously, also by bringing these different solutions, one of our goals is to also help our clients manage their risks, and in conjunction with that, helping them make sure that they do have a proper DR or business continuity plan and security plan in place, and the solutions to help them realize their DR and business continuity goals. So now over to iland. We're very pleased to have iland in our portfolio of suppliers, and obviously they've been recognized by Gartner as a leader, global leader of these sort of compliant cloud infrastructure and DR services, etc. Gloria, yes, I did see a question pop up around, will you get a copy of this presentation? Absolutely, we can send that out. We'll also be actually sending you a link to the recording of this webinar. So that will enable you to quickly fast forward through to any particular aspects that you need reminders on, etc. So that will be all coming out after the event. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Will. Will, you want to take it from here? Give us a good overview of these different your portfolio of services, etc. And then you're going to be digging down, obviously, in the DRaaS piece today.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Sam, and thanks everybody. So, like Sam said, iland we've been around for 25 years. I've got a slide later on talks about all of that good stuff. But really, we've been helping customers, solve their IT resiliency plans for many years. And I've been around the DR space for 2 decades now, and I've done everything from mirrored drives and putting them in a car and driving them to another location, all the way to the virtualization age, to now working in a cloud-based disaster recovery company. So I've kind of seen it all, done it all. But the way iland approaches this, and we'll kind of talk about it, is it's really about managing the risk and limiting the amount of work that the customer has to do to do that. Because at the end of the day, when you start thinking about budgets and you start thinking about disaster recovery solutions and stuff like that, it's almost always the very first thing to go, because there's not enough time, there's not enough money, there's not enough resources, and DR unfortunately is like an insurance plan, right? Do you really need it? Well, of course you need it, but can you do it? That's a whole nother question. Now, we actually do provide a whole bunch of other cloud-based services, object storage for archiving, infrastructure as a service for customers who want to get out of the data center and start leveraging, enterprise class cloud-based systems to run their organizations. Backup as a service, what Sam was talking about before with the whole 3-2-1 availability rule and the ability to have copies of your backups off-site. And then as more and more organizations are moving to Office 365, we have a whole solution for backing up and recovering that too, that we can have a whole nother conversation about with Sam and everybody around that portfolio as well.
Yeah,
and Sam, if you want to, go ahead.
I think a lot of folks who sign up for Office 365 kind of expect it to be backed up and so on and so forth. Do you want to just share a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So it's very interesting. There's a model of the responsibilities of Microsoft and the responsibilities of the customer, and then the responsibilities of basically the kind of built-in backups. And what a lot of organizations are finding is it covers them for a couple of months, and that's okay. But then anybody who has requirements for longer term archival or retention are finding that they're missing some policy gaps, because what happens is they didn't know that they only have 3 months of protection, and 6 months go by and they have a legal hold for potentially a harassment suit from an email, and now that data is no longer available, and now there's a lot of challenges that can occur for something like that. So whether you're recovering it for, I just lost an email, or my boss lost an email, or I need, all emails for the next, 7 years, there's a lot of misconceptions about what cloud-based SaaS offerings provide for long-term retention and protection. And that's where, like Veeam and Iland and USA Voice and Data come in and actually can fill, we call it minding the gap, because there is a gap there both in policy and in protection. And we can come in and help you mind that gap and protect those valuable assets. So cloud-based DR makes your job easier. And like I said, I've been so Sam, if you want to go to the next slide while I talk, I've been doing this for a very, very long time. Like I said, from the old days of having 2 different sites with dark fiber between them, and you had to match the BIOS, and then you had to do SAN-based replication of boot drives. And, if something went wrong and you didn't have the exact same hardware, then the OS wouldn't boot up. And what happens to these machines that didn't shut down properly? And all of that was crazy. And then, virtualization came along, a decade ago or so, and really kind of helped not only the data center from, capacity and leveraging hardware more beneficially and all that stuff, but it really kind of accelerated disaster recovery, because now you take this VMDK or this virtual machine image, and you can take it anywhere. It becomes portable and it becomes encapsulated. And, I always used to joke that you could take your virtual machines and you could put them on the moon, right? You could go anywhere in the world with them and continue to run your business. Well, now you take replication technologies, whether it's, block-based, or whether it's, write-based or whatever, and then you take the virtualization encapsulation concept, and now all of a sudden you can move your exact environment somewhere else. So now you don't have to worry about BIOSes and hardware dependencies and that kind of stuff. But you still were kind of stuck in the whole same idea of you needed another site, right? You needed a secondary data center, which meant you had to have some sort of hardware, and then you had to have, rack and stack and cooling and power and all that stuff. And then cloud comes along and starts offering a whole new cost model, both from a OpEx perspective versus CapEx to just a buy as you need, pay as you grow sort of mentality, that now you can start adding all those things combined, and now you get cloud-based disaster recovery as a service. So benefits are you don't need duplicate hardware, right? So you're not going out and buying additional hardware to match what you already have on site that may or may not ever be used. You don't have to worry about things like having a secondary data center with power and cooling and rack space, and now that you're paying for square footage and raised floors and all that crazy stuff, you don't have to do that anymore. And then cloud with virtualization offers a lot in the way of automation and orchestration that can help you actually achieve your IT resiliency. So at a whole, we've been doing this for a long time, and I've been doing this since before I was even at iland. But the whole idea is that iland, like Sam said, is our goal is the customer success, and that customer success means everything that they're trying to do is based around their resiliency, based upon recovery, based upon their organization. And so we help them all along the way. We make it simple. We help you answer what questions, whether it's a compliance question or it's a capacity question. And then we make sure that you can do everything that you need to, because our organizational infrastructure is probably just like yours. It's a VMware-based enterprise class cloud that supports disaster recovery, virtualization, infrastructure as service, backups, everything like that. So, Sam, if you want to go to the next slide real quick. We're globally located, and you can actually kind of skip this build, but basically, no matter what you're trying to do, iland has a cloud that can serve whatever you're trying to do, whether it's global, whether it's regional, whether it's local, whether you need multiple different cloud sites to replicate between or to store data in. So we have that as well. Next slide, Sam. And then, Sam talked about it already, and one of our proudest things is being named a Gartner leader in the Magic Quadrant for Disaster Recovery as a Service for the last 4 years running. And so people who may or may not be familiar with that, basically Gartner goes around and they evaluate all of the different disaster recovery as a service platforms, and they evaluate it for multiple different things. And I'm going to show you a lot of those things, reason why we're a leader, but things like automation and orchestration, console availability, global availability, reach, bandwidth, performance, all of that stuff. And then here's a whole bunch of other awards that we've won from our partners as well. Sam, next slide. So why does all this matter, right? Because disaster recovery as a service allows for organizations to take that step, right? So in the past, it's always been, yep, we need DR. And then someone says, all right, cool, go buy a duplicate of everything we have. Go find us a new data center. Go get some power and cooling and some, 4 more IT staff, and then we can make this happen. And everybody says, no, that's not going to happen at all. And so the DR plan falls by its wayside and all that stuff. So the truth is, cloud-based disaster recovery really enables organizations of any level to become IT resilient. And so you don't have to go buy equipment. You don't have to worry about hardware contracts. You don't have to worry about maintenance renewals or rack space or colo space or anything like that. You can choose where it makes sense to go. Because of the virtualization, because of the encapsulation of the virtual machines, and because of the automation and orchestration, the ability to schedule testing at any time without disruption is one of the biggest key differentiators of kind of a do-it-yourself versus a cloud-based, fully automated disaster recovery plan. And I'll show you that during the demonstration. But basically, the ability to, years ago, right, you would say, oh, well, we need to test our DR plan for our audit. So let's go ahead and shut down production, and we'll send an email so everybody has a good 3-day weekend, and then we'll go to the other site. We'll try to bring it online, and 50 different things don't work because they weren't documented properly, and this application was never actually replicated, so let's go ahead and replicate that real quick. And oh, this machine has a hard drive failure, let's go ahead and replace that. And then it's Monday and you still don't have a successful DR plan. Then you have to revert everything to go back, and then you say, well, we failed our audit and we probably won't get to this for another year. Like, I lived that. It was not a fun thing. Now you can say, oh, your boss comes in, your auditor comes in and says, hey, how's your DR plan? You say, I don't know, I'll push a button and let's go get some lunch. You come back from lunch and you see a report that says, 172 out of 175 virtual machines powered up. Here are the different VLANs. Here are the different services that started. These virtual machines had an issue, so go ahead and check them. Here's the audit report. And you didn't have to do anything, right? And so automation, orchestration, all of that really plays into a key factor when it comes to disaster recovery in the cloud. And that reporting and the availability of the testing, all without impacting your production environment, allows you to do it anytime you need to, whether it's for reporting or because you've added new services. Think about how many times you add a new service to your environment. If you forget to replicate it or you forget to protect it, and there's a data outage or an incident, you may have just, gotten in trouble because you weren't able to protect that newest asset. So it's really, really powerful. And because it is a cloud-based resource, it's agile, it's scalable, and it really is a pay-as-you-need, pay-as-you-grow sort of environment. So you can start with 10, 20 machines, you can go to 1,500 machines, whatever it is you need, knowing that it's going to scale with you. Next slide, Sam. At Island, like I said, we've been doing this for a while, a long time. Sam even said, this is our main goal is to solve customers' challenges with this. So you have full access to all of our top tier support. All of the expertise that we have is because we're helping thousands of customers solve the same problem. We only do a couple of things, but we do them very, very, very well. And we've helped customers. Chances are nobody has a problem we haven't already seen and solved, right? And that's one of our biggest priorities, is making sure that we can help customers solve those IT resilience challenges that they have. Next slide. So when we talk about this, right, it's real easy to understand, all the things that we've said so far about you need IT resilience and you need it in addition to your backups, and you want to be able to, bring your environment online no matter what the situation is. But when it comes down to it, really it's around changing the fundamental kind of idea of traditional IT into what IT really should be. And that's all about, delivering business or delivering value back to the business with IT solutions versus just what we usually call keeping the lights on or the traditional IT, right? You still need all that. And disaster recovery has always been one of those weird things where you say, okay, well, we need extra headcount because we don't have enough people to do the day-to-day job, let alone worry about, disaster mitigation, but we just can't do that because then what does this person do? And so the idea at a upper level is all of IT should be focused on delivering value back to the business, and anything that can be done to automate and to simplify the traditional IT stack should be embraced, including cloud-based disaster recovery. Next slide. Now, once we start understanding a customer's challenge and what they're trying to achieve and what kind of availability that they want and where they're going to go, the next question that always comes with cloud is, well, great, I want cloud. This sounds perfect. I want to do all this. Where do I even begin? And that's always a challenge for any customer, no matter what they're trying to get into, but especially cloud-based disaster recovery or cloud-based backup. The question is always like, well, what are you trying to protect? What are you trying to bring? What do you need to run your organization? So Island has a free analysis tool called Catalyst. And basically what it'll do is it'll scan your virtual environment and allow you to pick and choose what you need to bring. So when you start thinking about, well, how am I going to group my tier 1 apps, or what happens if I lose access to my manufacturing systems or my PeopleSoft, or whatever it is you're doing on a day-to-day basis, you can start to now group and quantify those IT assets and dependencies together, so that now you can say, oh, okay, this is my tier 1 set, this is my tier 2 set, or my gold, silver, bronze, whatever you want to call it. And here's how much CPU they use. Here's how much memory they use. Here's how much storage they're going to use, so that I know when I go to a cloud-based environment, I'm going to know what my consumption is. And that's really important, because if you think about traditionally, a database person comes up and says, hey, I need a new database. And you're like, sure, how much RAM do you want? And they're like, well, all of it, and I want all the CPU and all the RAM. And you can kind of get away with that on premises, because you have stuff sitting around. But when you move to the cloud, because it's now a pay-as-you-consume cost model, whether you're doing chargeback or showback or not, you want to know what they actually are consuming. And so you can run these reports to find out that, yeah, you gave them 64 terabytes of RAM, but, they're using, 25 gigs or I don't know, whatever. And it's important to understand what the actual utilization and consumption is. And so we have that tool that can digest that and showcase it out for you. Next slide, Sam. Here's where we're going to actually go into the demonstration. But the reason behind this demonstration is really about understanding that you never want to lose visibility or management into your entire environment, right? And so that is all about understanding the iland Secure Cloud Console and what it's capable of doing. So Sam, if you want to go ahead and give that control to me.
Oh, you taking this or Joe?
Oh, this is Will. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead and make me presenter, and I will.
You got it.
There we go. Let's share this, and let me know if you can see this. Okay.
Yes.
You good?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, cool. So let me start. So this will be pretty brief, just to kind of showcase the whole iland Secure Cloud Console and then our continuity concepts. But the whole idea behind the iland Secure Cloud Console is you are now leveraging cloud-based resources, cloud-based infrastructure, cloud-based disaster recovery, and so that means you no longer have the same tools at your disposal that you do on site. So you don't have Virtual Center, you don't have your firewall, widget or anything like that. But you don't want to lose that manageability and visibility. So in the iland Secure Cloud Console, I'm going to cover a couple of different things, but primarily this is your unified management platform. And a lot of people hate to hear the words single pane of glass, but I'm going to use it because it really is a single pane of glass into all of your cloud-based entities. So the first thing I want to show everybody real quick is really around user management and identity access control, right? Because one of the things that people are concerned about is as they move to the cloud is you always hear these horror stories about, a database that is completely wide open to anyone in the internet, or, everyone in the company has access to, the spreadsheet drive and now everybody sees everybody's salaries or something like that. So before you can even get to your cloud-based resources, there's a full concept of identity access control management with user-based roles. And this is where, just like with Active Directory or with Virtual Center roles, you make sure that you assign the people who need to have visibility to certain solutions, the roles and abilities to see those solutions, but nothing else, right? So, maybe the finance person needs to be able to see billing information, but does not necessarily need to be able to click a button to fail over your entire organization into the cloud. Or a junior admin should be able to see virtual machines, but not necessarily delete them. Or, modify firewall rules is available for the network admin, but not necessarily the OS admin, or whatever it is. Your typical, identity access management, single sign-on with a number of popular single sign-on technologies is going to be coming. So if you're using, Google Suite, or you're using a couple of other things, you're going to be able to basically just access your cloud-based environment with the same single sign-on that you do everything else. So that's really, really important that I wanted to mention, because once you're in the cloud, once you're managing the cloud, you want to make sure that you have an understanding of how that's looking. Now, we have a whole bunch of videos around our backup and our object storage and Office 365 and that kind of stuff, but we're really going to kind of focus on the console and how it relates to disaster recovery as a service, because that's where it becomes really, really powerful. So if I go to, let's see, over here I have all my different global data centers that I have resources in. So let me go to Dallas 02, which is one of our data centers that has some virtual machines being replicated too, but it also has a bunch of virtual machines running, as you can see here. So one of the cool things about our enterprise class platform is not only is it a VMware-based platform, but it's the same platform whether you're running infrastructure as a service or disaster recovery as a service. And that's really important because we don't want customers to feel that when they're bringing their environment over, that it's not going to perform as well as it does on site. And that's a very important thing, because you don't know how long you're going to be failed over for. If you have, malware or ransomware, or you have a power outage, or there's a natural disaster or anything like that, you may be running for multiple weeks in the cloud, and you need to make sure that it can be as performant, if not better performant, than what you have on site. And so whether you're running infrastructure as a service side by side with disaster recovery as a service, or one or the other, it's all in the same enterprise hardware stack. So when I look over here, I see a whole bunch of virtual machines. These are the ones that are currently being run. But if I go to the continuity tab, here is where we have all of the disaster recovery stuff. Now, we have this concept called a recovery group. So recovery group is just a grouping of IT assets. And this could be however it is you dictate it. So it could be all your Active Directory servers, or it could be AD plus DNS plus DHCP is all one group. It could be dependencies like a database cluster plus your application farm plus your web farm, and a couple of client machines. All of that can be created as a recovery group. Whatever IT assets you have, whether it's tiered, tier 1, tier 2, or gold, silver, bronze, whether it's based on applications, however you personally are managing and grouping this stuff, that's what's called a recovery group. And then over here, we have what's called a runbook. And a runbook is basically the automation and orchestration. Because think about it, if you have 10 virtual machines, it's real easy to say, okay, I got to power on AD first. All right, that's going to come up. Okay, now let's do DNS. Okay, now let's do, web and, mail and something else, right? That's pretty easy. But when you have 1,500 virtual machines running your entire organization globally, it's a whole lot harder to do that manually. So the idea of a runbook is the automation and orchestration of both the powering up and the sequence, as well as anything else that you need to run your organization. So when you create a runbook, you can have some or all of your recovery groups. So this allows you to do, partial failover. Because, think about it. If you have 1,500 virtual machines and malware or ransomware hits, 25 of them, you may not want to fail over 1,500 virtual machines to get your environment back up and running. You may just need that subset of machines. And so you could have multiple different runbooks that say things like, this is my tier 1, this is my everything, this is my application, this is, just these 5 things, whatever it is. And then when you create the runbook and you automate it, you can say this virtual machine comes up first, then you wait 30 seconds or 2 minutes, then this one comes up. Make sure you change these VNICs for these different virtual machines. Make sure you change DNS, or make sure you change DHCP. There's a lot of different things that you can automate and orchestrate inside your runbooks here. Yes.
So Will, as far as like sort of best practices, when you're developing these runbooks, etc., are you, do people like start with like smaller runbooks around the smaller aspects and then copy those aspects into larger runbooks and so on, or the runbooks, can you do nesting of runbooks?
So yes to all of that, right? So it all depends. Everybody is different, and that's part of the onboarding and the concierge, support that we have. We can help you understand that, right? So a lot of times organizations will start. First they'll just start with, okay, let's just take our, top 20 virtual machines that we need to bring over. So they'll create 1 or 2 recovery groups. They'll create 3 or 4 different runbooks, based on full site failover or partial failover or whatever. And then they realize the success that they have, and then they start adding another 20 virtual machines at a pop. And so now all of a sudden you have, 150 runbooks. You probably need to clean some of that up. So the answer is yes, and we've seen it all, and we're here to help you understand that and do that. Because you could, if you wanted to, have a recovery group for every single individual virtual machine and a runbook for every single virtual machine. It'd be completely inefficient, and you'd probably pull your hair out, but you could do that, right? So our job is to help you have a better understanding of how the tools work and help you make those decisions. So if these 25 virtual machines are all necessary to come up first, let's create a dependency group and a recovery group and a runbook based around that. And then we'll have a couple of different things and flavors that we can do to change and to modify that. So
cool.
Does that kind of help answer that?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I just want to give you a quick time check. We've probably got about another 15 minutes, then that will leave us 5 minutes just to tie a bow on it at the end here.
Not a problem. I'll talk even faster. So no. So okay. So so being able to understand your dependencies and your recovery groups and your run books. The next part really comes around the benefit of cloud-based disaster recovery really is around this non-disruptive independent testing, right? So over here I have this failover wizard. I can click on the failover wizard and I can choose if it's live or if it's a test, and I can choose which run books to initiate. Now, if I'm doing a test, here's where it's really, really powerful. If I'm doing a test, remember, I'm bringing up the same virtual machines that you have currently running your production workload. So same IP address, same host name, same MAC address. So you can't have that happen in an environment where the two can communicate. Otherwise, you'll have all kinds of weird stuff. You'll have mismatched IP addresses and duplicate names, and everything will just not be bad, or not be good in spectacularly bad way. So what happens is the virtualized environment will actually isolate all those virtual machines. It'll set up gateways and NATing and routing and all of that stuff to completely protect your production environment, but also allow you full accessibility into the test environment so that you can do anything and everything you need to. So, think about it as a exact copy of your data center and the last time that you replicated, and being able to test, be able to run, do whatever. And then you can always, in the case of a real disaster, you can always just make that the permanent place. And then later on, you can always fail back to your production environment. But that non-disruptive testing is very powerful. And down here, what you'll see is you can see some of the different tasks. You can get reports. And here's where things like auditing and generate reports really comes into to play. I can click on the protection summary. I can download the protection summary. It's going to tell me all the virtual machines. This allows you to also have an understanding of, as you add new resources and you're running your tests frequently for auditing, making sure that these new applications and these new assets are also being included to be able to fail over, to test, and to report on, right? And so you're able to do all of that stuff. And now the most important part is, once you've actually failed over, whether it's a test or it's a real failover, you want to be able to access it as if it was your production environment, right? Like, you may be failed over for 2 or 3 weeks because of, a quarantine, or because of malicious software, or a natural disaster. So over here, whether your infrastructure as a service or your disaster recovery as a service, it's the same concept. All of the visibility and the tools and management are all here. So here we have all of our different data centers. Here we have all of our different global data centers. These are the internal data centers right here. So if you have separate, inside a virtual center, if you have folders or different virtual center, call outs or trees or anything like that, as you segment it, you can replicate all of that stuff. Here you have virtual applications. You've got your virtual machines. Every single virtual machine inside the cloud console is accessible with all the same tools and properties that you leverage Virtual Center on from a day-to-day basis. Full API coverage as well. You can run Power CLI and PowerShell scripts and all that stuff. You have all of the same actions that you have just like you do on site. So you have the ability to reconfigure a virtual machine. When you fail over and you're like, oh, I really need more RAM, well, go ahead and add it, or add a second disk to it, add a CD-ROM to it. One of the more powerful tools is the ability to open the console. So when you think about, a lot of times when you look at a cloud-based infrastructure, you have an RDP session, and that's great unless you can't get to it because of some sort of networking issue. So being able to open the console, change the VNIC, change the VLAN, change the IP address, all that stuff is fully compatible with what you normally do on your processes on site. You also have the ability to see all of the performance and the metrics and all the stuff that you normally would. And then one of the most important things is, we always talk about how backup is not the only thing you need, but you still need it. When you fail over your organization into the cloud, the last thing you want to have to worry about is you're running for 3 or 4 days and then something happens. A file gets deleted, a virtual machine gets, blue screened, or something happens because you've failed over, you did your IT resilience, everyone's excited because your business is up and running, and then 3 days later something happens. Well, as soon as a virtual machine gets brought online in the cloud, we are automatically taking air-gapped backups of those virtual machines. So even in a DR situation, you're not without some sort of backup. You also have the ability to manage all of your networking from within the Secure Cloud Console, your firewalls, your netting, your DHCP. We have full support for Layer 2 VPNs. So Layer 2 VPNs are awesome. So let's say you have 100 virtual machines and you fail over 20. Well, you don't want to have to deal with changing those IP addresses or DNS names, but you still want, the server 1 on your on-site premise with a 10 dot whatever address to be able to talk to server 27 with a 10 dot address that happens to be living in the cloud. Well, you can do that with a Layer 2 VPN. So it makes a tunnel between the two sites. It makes a secure tunnel. And now it acts as if you had those virtual machines in your local environment, but now they're running in the cloud. So it really helps with that business continuity, IT resilience strategy as well. And then there's just a ton more features within the console that we don't have time to go through today, but you can check out more information on our YouTube channel for a full rundown of all the different stuff. Obviously one of the biggest things people always ask about is, if I go over here and I click on billing, right? So once you're leveraging cloud, you always have to know what's it going to cost you. And so, let me go to Dallas O2 real quick. So whatever you're doing in the cloud, because it's a new pay-as-you-use model, you want to know what you're using and what you're consuming. And so at any time, you can go into the billing tab and see, hourly, real-time, historic, find out what your costs are, so that you can have an understanding of that and make sure that the cost model doesn't outstrip what you're trying to achieve with IT resilience. So that is just a really quick summary of the iland Secure Cloud Console and how it enables you the ability to do automation and orchestration of your disaster recovery, and then what you do once it's up and running in the cloud, how you can manage and see it. And then, depending on what you're trying to do, once everything is back, you just fail over all your changes and you bring your environment back online and you fail back over and you're good to go. So Sam, I'll let you take back control real quick and we'll finish this up.
Sure. So while I'm switching back, excuse me, let me go back. Let me know when you back online.
There we go. Yeah, I see it.
You see the slide? Okay.
Yep.
Can you give us an idea of, what the process would look like for engaging an iland team to put together a proposal for a DR as a service solution?
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously, working with you, Sam, the very first thing we would do is run that catalyst report. And that basically just gives us an understanding of the organizational layout. It also helps a lot of customers because, it's funny how many times we talk to customers and we're like, oh, well, we see that you don't want to add these 18 servers to your DR plan. Why? And they're like, well, we don't actually use those. They just happen to be sitting around and I need to decommission them. So it's a good visibility tool that will go through and show you everything that you have. And it also allows you to do some modeling. One of the things that we highly tout is that, disaster recovery isn't just a simple technology conversation anymore. It's all about having the conversation with business owners. What do you need to run your business? What do you need to run your part of the organization? What can you live without? What can't you live without? Because there's a lot of times when, especially in the IT world, and we know this, that you just keep adding more and more stuff. You keep adding more and more stuff. And eventually you don't know what's necessary or what's going to run. And, when I've got customers with 1,500 virtual machines, and, they spent more time figuring out who was going to come up first than how we're going to get 1,500 virtual machines in the cloud. So, we start with having just a really good conversation with all of us, understanding, what are the pain points, what are you trying to solve, what business applications are the most important. And sometimes that means going back to the business owners first and then coming to the table with, hey, you know what? I know you think that your application is the most important thing for the business, but it's actually tier 3, and we need to get this other stuff up first, right? So those are hard conversations to have internally, but we've helped so many customers have those conversations that we're really good at that. And then just understanding, well, okay, well, if you've got 100 virtual machines, how much disk space is that going to mean? How much, how long does it take to initially seed and that kind of stuff? So it's really that consultative approach to what you're trying to solve and then what you have. And then we start talking about technology features and options, which technology vendor and, how do you want to do it and, all that stuff. So it's great because we have been doing this for so long that we know all the right questions to ask. But if you were to try to do it yourself and just say, oh, I'm just going to go do DR to the cloud, there's a lot of times people just miss a bunch of stuff that we've already seen.
No, that's great. Yeah. And I think that really is a real differentiator. And also, you mentioned the technology vendors, the sort of behind the scenes technology vendors. Maybe you want to just touch on those again real quick.
Yeah, sure. So some of our biggest partners are Veeam has software that will do not only local backups, but also disaster recovery with replication. That one is based right now, currently with the technology that they have, it's based on snapshots. So, it's a snapshot-based replica. We also have, which is great for, 15-minute 15 minutes to maybe every couple hours for an RPO. And then we also have a partner called Zerto, and they do almost real-time replication. So when you want to have like an RPO of seconds instead of minutes, you can leverage that technology. We also leverage other things like the ability to replicate a physical, so it's almost like a P2V with an agent with Veeam, or even the VMware replication software is available and viable. And also some other things like I don't know who owns it now, like Carbon Black maybe owns it, but Double Take, like the old Double Take software. So really, again, the technology discussion comes after the figuring out, well, what are your RPOs and what are your RTOs, and what virtual machines are you trying to do, and how many of them are there, and what are you trying to accomplish, all that stuff. But we do leverage a lot of different technology partners from VMware to Veeam to Zerto to Double Take to couple others as needed for what we're able to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think maybe you want to just touch on who have you guys sort of displaced from a DR service provider perspective. Obviously you've been growing like weeds and so on and so forth.
So
like
well,
your traditional DR providers, like your SunGuards and so on and so forth, right?
Well, all I can say is only one of us has filed for bankruptcy, right? And it wasn't us. No. So so kidding aside, honestly, the people that we're displacing is their own organization, right? Because for the longest time, the two things were always, I can afford to have a second data center, so I'm going to do it myself, or I can't afford a second data center, so I'm not going to do it at all, right? So those are the two people's problems we're solving most often, right? The people who have a secondary data center are like, wow, this, I'm about to come up on my 3-year end of life for duplicate hardware in both production and DR. I've never once had to use my DR site, so I've paid, millions of dollars for all this hardware, and I can't justify that again for another 3 years. So that's where disaster recovery as a service really makes sense. And then the customers who aren't able to afford a secondary data center but know they need IT resilience, it's very easy to go in, show them what we have, what we're capable of, and then make it their first one. Then in addition, yes, we've displaced many other cloud providers, hyperscalers specifically because of, the console that you just saw. the full onboarding concierge service. I mean, this is what we focus on. Like, I don't have a software portfolio of 975 things that you can buy. I've got like 6, but we do those 6 very, very well. We have full support. We have full capabilities and knowledge in those specific fields. And so we do supplant a lot of hyperscalers, because a lot of times people will try them, realize that they can't orchestrate, they can't automate, they're not able to bring their environments on in a timely fashion. It's not a VMware environment, so they have to worry about virtual machines being translated into a different file type and all that stuff. And then some of the older traditional ones, like you mentioned, like SunGuard and a couple of other ones, again, because of cost and performance and availability of our global data centers and our console, and I mean, like all the things I showed, that's why Gartner has rated us so highly year after year. It's not just the console, it's not just the technology partners, it's everything from support to compliance to just everything. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers that.
No, that's very helpful. And again, just as we wrap up here, I just wanted to bring up this key takeaway slide. And again, obviously the 3-2-1 rule of data availability, backups are not enough. DR as a service can provide true IT resilience. So again, even the biggest disaster, way bigger than just a loss of data or some corruption of data, the sort of disasters that we're hearing about more and more often, right? Can really mobilize a complete IT resilience capability for any business. And then one thing we haven't really talked about so much, but typically there was always some reluctance to move to the cloud, right? Initially there was always the concept of the server hugger, although I think now even though the most avid server hugger is now recognizing the extreme value of the cloud, and particularly like the tools that we've seen today from iland in terms of like the visibility and control they have over cloud-based infrastructure that they wouldn't really have over physical infrastructure that they would normally be managing themselves. So I think both backup as a service and DR as a service have provided phenomenal stepping stones for businesses adopting the cloud as their overall full infrastructure, becoming like almost like the born in the cloud type sort of companies that do have that flexibility, because they're not being dragged around by a whole bunch of physical infrastructure which doesn't have the flexibility that these cloud platforms provide. So again, I think you may be somewhere along the adoption profile of cloud services. For me, backup as a service, DR as a service are probably the easiest stepping stones for any business as they continue that transition to cloud, to being a cloud-based infrastructure company. So
yeah, definitely. And I mean, one of the more powerful things that we've seen is, when you're looking, I mean, as a cloud vendor, right, we have, just tons of hardware and, enterprise class this and all of that stuff. It's funny to see and talk to customers who are coming off their 3 and 4 year life cycle of hardware, and they'll use us for DR, and they'll run something for DR, and they're like, this performs 4 or 5 times faster than it does on site. Like, why would I mean, I could go buy more hardware, but I already know the performance metrics that I'm getting because I've failed over and I've tested. So they can leverage that as their not only as the toe dip into cloud, but honestly, it's the migration strategy as well. Like, you have built-in migration when you start with disaster recovery as a service,
right.
because you can push a button and now you're in the cloud and you just migrated all your stuff without actually having to worry about anything else.
Yeah, and I think obviously you know, these sorts of solutions make any IT director, VP, CIO, or whatever, or even like the traditional IT guy, you know, it makes them look the hero. I mean, it really does. I mean, it's like, oh, you want this information? Here it is. You want this information? Here it is. You want to do this? Okay, press a couple of buttons, it's done, right? You know, all those sort of tasks which would take ages and ages and ages to implement in a sort of more traditional infrastructure can be done literally at a mouse click.
Yeah,
I
and
think
I
it's
know we're out of time, but one thing I wanted to
yeah,
say, especially in today's exact climate, because of what is happening worldwide, what you're finding is that IT organizations who have planned and who are ready have made the transition for their workforce working from home much easier than IT organizations that didn't plan and are now struggling just to try to get work done because they are trying to deal with all that stuff. And it's, you know, superhero, you know, hero, you know, whatever you want to call them. IT is really shining in the last couple of weeks because they're the ones that are allowing organizations to continue work or not.
yeah, no, that's totally the case. And I know we did our last webinar last month was with a desktop as a service provider, and again, how perfectly timed are these discussions, you know, around making remote working a possibility, even when folks are being, you know, mandated to work from home and not go anywhere. So anyway, with that, I really just have to thank you so much, Will, for a great presentation here. And for all attendees, I absolutely encourage you, if you are considering your DR options, etc., or cloud infrastructure options, do reach out to your USA Voice data team. We can be reached at info@usavoicedata.com, or just call us on our main number, 312-604-3070. And we would be happy to pull together a free DRaaS as a service or cloud infrastructure evaluation and pricing. So we're happy to start the conversation here, and it all starts with a conversation. So thanks again for your time, everyone. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you so much. Have a good one, everybody.